Joining us now, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and the ambassador in residence to the Atlantic Council, Michael Oren. Ambassador, thank you very much for being here. I actually want to start. I understand you worked with Henry Kissinger. I'd like to start there with the passing of this just absolute giant, a very controversial one, but a giant nonetheless. What are your memories of him?
Well, it's always, first of all, it's good to be with you, and thank you for having me on. You know, it's always an extraordinary experience to meet and work with somebody who you've read extensively and you've studied. I studied Henry Kissinger. We read his MA thesis on Bismarck, his PhD thesis on Metternich. We read his books. One of the greatest books of all time about the Middle East is a book called Crisis, which is simply the transcripts of his discussions during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Literally, you cannot put this book down. And this was Henry Kissinger. I got to meet Kissinger in a very interesting way. Firstly, as an historian. He was very concerned about his legacy and very concerned that the people of Israel, the Jewish people, would remember him fondly because he had played a sometimes controversial role in our history, particularly surrounding the Yom Kippur War of 1973. He prevented Israel from launching a preemptive strike that could have saved many Israeli lives. And then he also pressured Israel to give up territory in order ultimately to make peace with Egypt. And he should be remembered very fondly for that. So he would call me in and discuss his role. He wanted to clarify that he had worked very assiduously and honestly for the people of Israel. And then later as ambassador, I got to work with him again. I would consult with him frequently about the nature of U.S.'s relationship. I'll never forget our first meeting when I said to him, Dr. Kissinger, and you always called him doctor, not professor. Are you concerned that if the United States makes a nuclear arrangement with Iran, would America lose its hegemony in the Middle East? And I'll never forget what he said to me. He says, what makes you think, do the imitation. I can do a good Kissinger imitation. What makes you think that anybody in the White House cares about continued American hegemony in the Middle East? What a line that was. So I saw him frequently over the years. And together with other Israeli leaders, we would always meet with Kissinger.
Yeah, really, that is just so remarkable. And, I think it really also, I'm glad that you brought up his book and his role in those previous negotiations, because we're also here talking about the news today about ongoing negotiations in the same region to try and extend a truce in a war between Hamas and Israel. And it really does seem as though Kissinger, and I'd be interested kind of in your thoughts and reflections, the model that he built in 1973 is one that is still in use today, albeit in a more modern way.
He invented the whole system of shuttle diplomacy. He would go back and forth from Jerusalem to Cairo, from Cairo to Damascus. There was always that funny line. Every time he went to Cairo, he would get kissed by Anwar Sadat, the president. Every time he go to Damascus, he'd get kissed by Hafiz al-Assad, the president of the current dictator of Syria. And one time he came back from these shuttles and met with Golda Meir and gave her a kiss. And she said to him, "Oh, Mr. Secretary, I didn't know you kissed girls too."
She's legendary. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to unfold in the next 24 to 48 hours, because our Matthew Chance was reporting at the top of the show that there had been some back and forth because there were one of the lists that Hamas provided included people who were no longer living, and Israel has said no. Like, this deal is about making sure living people continue to come out of Gaza. That is how we are going to extend this truce. It does seem to be fraying around the edges. What are you looking for in the next 24 to 48 hours to see how we may or may not see resumption of hostilities in the region?
Well, let me first say that on a very personal level, I'm delighted. I just before getting onto this program, heard that the list includes a young woman named Mia Karim and Mir Shem Karim, who is, I've been in touch with her mother since her first day, October 8th. And working very hard. She's a dual French-Israeli citizen, and her mother, Karen, was able to go and visit with the president of France and previous presidents of France. And apparently this has paid off because she isn't, she's an elderly, she isn't a child, she's 22 years old. And I just heard from her mother that she's getting out. So on a personal level, I'm very, very relieved. But yes, there is an end to this process. And the process is this. Hamas can only release so many hostages. The hostages are Hamas's get out of Gaza free card. They're the ultimate human shield, because Hamas knows once it releases the last hostage, then Israel can go and flood those hundreds of miles of tunnels. It can ignite them in some way and kill Hamas. Maybe the ultimate solution would be that Hamas would give over the last of the hostages, and Israel would let Hamas get on boats and go somewhere. That's what we did with the PLO in 1982 in Beirut. Exactly that. But barring that situation, there has to be at some point an end to these negotiations. Israel's position has been to get as many hostages, particularly women and children, out as possible. But keeping in mind that the ceasefire that Hamas wants means Hamas literally gets away with mass murder, and Israel loses. People forget we have 250,000 refugees of our own. People have been moved away from the borders and can't go back to their homes as long as Hamas poses this type of mortal threat. And Hamas says that if it survives this, it's going to propose that mortal threat. It's exactly what Hamas says again and again. So we will not be able to restore our internal security or certainly our even regional deterrence, because Iran will internalize that you can hit Israel with impunity. And when Israel goes to defend itself, they'll slap a ceasefire on us. We won't be able to defend ourselves. So Israel will have to continue the battle at some point. Every member of the Israeli government says this. The question is at what point? Right. And I think we may be nearing that point.
All right. Former Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you very much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. I hope you come back.
Thank you.